Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Suicide Silence, Remember You Must Die, out March 10th on Century Media Records. This album has 12 tracks, 40 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are an American deathcore band. As far as the design is concerned, there's not much to say. The album is very compact, very cohesive, very linear, straightforward from beginning to end, but it has a sense of connectivity between the tracks. They're all pulling in the same direction. They all have the same intent in mind. This allows 40 minutes to feel a lot shorter, and when you look at the design of the record and when you look at that experience that it gives, this adds to its overall playability. And for a record that has this heaviness, this sound, this experience, you honestly don't want them to throw in things there that are not needed. Just keep it bare bones, keep it as simple as possible, and let the music just really guide the listener through the entire experience of listening to this record. As far as the sound is concerned, I feel like this album has two main core elements. On one hand, it feels and it sounds more like a hardcore album. It still has all the deathcore elements. It's still a deathcore sounding album from start to finish. But the hardcore spinal cord of their music, of their origins, is really well represented on this record from start to finish. There are songs, there are pockets within songs that it feels like you're listening to a hardcore band. And that adds dynamic to the tracks. It adds more life to the tracks. It also gives them more of a raw feel to it. It makes these songs at times feel like they're one-take live recordings, which always adds value to how you perceive a record because you're able to connect a lot better with it. The other element of this album that I thought was really interesting is the fat production that it has. Everything surrounding the sound on this album is fat. It's thick. The guitar sound, the drums, the bass. When you have production like this and when you have sound like this, it's not just fat, it's not just thick, it's not just heavy. It also becomes groovy. This is a super groovy album all around. You start to think at times that this is what Pantera would sound like if they released a deathcore album. It just has a lot of grooviness to it that mixed in with that thickness makes for still a heavy experience, but one that's a lot easier to digest. And you're not looking necessarily for vocal hooks, you're looking for melodic hooks, for riffs that become memorable and allow these songs to have a life beyond the songs themselves. Now, within that sound experience, you obviously have to talk guitars and drums. This is not to say that the bass doesn't play a main role on this album. There's certain tracks that the bass really pops and helps define the grooviness when everything else perhaps is a little bit more straightforward, heavy. But the guitars and drums are the spinal cord of how this sound moves. Now, the drum sound on this album really becomes the backbone of everything else that is happening. I love the fact that they didn't splash the cymbals too much. They kept this album grounded as far as the drums are concerned. That thickness of sound, that fat production, really enhancing the power, the thump that the drums have on this album. This is a very thumping sounding album as far as drums are concerned. And then having that experience in the background or as the backdrop, as the foundation for everything else, allows the guitars to still be heavy, to still be brutal at times, but also have great riffs and sound very groovy. This is a very dynamic album, but an album that always stays connected as far as what the drums and guitars are doing. They're not there in terms of moving in different lanes with the same direction in mind. No, they're moving together. They're in the same car. One is driving, the other one is on the passenger seat, and they have that destination in mind, but they're working together. This is an album that really allows drum sound and guitar sound to feel more as one, more so than two unique experiences, perhaps fighting for supremacy. Now, as far as vocals are concerned, I must say I felt like the vocals were a little bit of the weak spot of this record. I wasn't completely sold on the vocal performance from start to finish. There are certain songs on this album where the vocals work really well, but there's also some songs on this album where the vocals feel disconnected from the sound and the experience that the record is giving. This is a very linear album sound-wise. Nothing changes too much. It's all about that fat production and that thick, groovy sound. The vocals, in my humble opinion, needed to be a little bit more raw, a little bit more direct, not trying to move too much around within your range, not trying to push too much, and more going with not one size fits all, but a little bit more of a natural approach that fits better with this groovier sound. I felt at times that the sound of the record was taking me in one direction and the vocals were pushing me in a completely different one. So there was a disconnect from one to the other that becomes more apparent on certain songs than others. There are certain tracks on this record, like my favorite songs on this record, that I'm going to talk about soon. I felt like in those songs the disconnect wasn't there. There was more of a raw vocal approach that matched the intensity of the tracks, that matched the grooviness of the tracks, and therefore everything was coming together more as one. And the divide that you don't see in the drums and guitars, you also didn't see in the vocals. But that wasn't consistent throughout the entire album, and that really gives this record a little bit of a negative push and when you're looking at the full picture of what this record could be. Great sounding album, outstanding sounding album, one of their best sounding records in recent history, but the vocals just didn't match that same sound consistently from start to finish. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Kill Forever, a pounding track, great drums, great guitars, really heavy, relentless both musically and vocally, allowing both of those elements, guitars and drums, to combine really well. It's a thick and thicker sound as far as this song is concerned, creating at times a little bit of a devastating sound experience. It just has great pop in the drums, thumping drum sound, outstanding thumping drum sound on this track. The guitar sound is excellent as well, as it is on every single song. The vocals on this song match really well with the overall mood and with the overall sound experience, allowing the track to have a little bit more of a hardcore feel, but everything fits well in that design and that idea that you're gonna get from this track. Next we have Endless Dark, pedal to the metal, a track that feels still very groovy. For as heavy as it is, it's also very groovy. This is Pantera if Pantera did a deathcore song. It has incredible guitar licks, incredible riffs, great guitar sound, a song that also mixes a lot of brutality into that grooviness, allowing you to see the two sides of the band, or the two sides that they're trying to represent throughout this entire album really well. The vocals emphasize that sound perfectly, being a little bit more blended into the groovier side of the sound, and a little bit more brutal when it comes to the heavier side of the sound. A track that's on point, short track, but it doesn't leave you wanting more. It just gives you everything that it has. Last but not least, Be Deceived. I have to start off by saying great bass on this track. This is a song that's sound-wise not as groovy as the other two. So the drums and guitars feel heavier, feel more aggressive on this song from start to finish. But for them to connect this track with the rest of the album, they use the bass in order to create some groovy bass lines, and that is where you're gonna find that red line that moves across each and every single song. Not always using the same elements to create it, and this song is a perfect example of going with a little bit of a heavier side sound-wise, using the bass to infuse some grooviness into that overall experience, making the track a lot richer, a lot better composed, a lot better together, and also the vocal performance with the layers that it has, it adds depth to that vocal performance, and it makes the track feel a little bit bigger. Musically, it stretches, and vocally, it stretches as well. This is it. Suicide Silence, Remember, You Must Die, out March 10th on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.